Okay, on the line we have Dr. Chenelle Jones, and Dr. Chenelle Jones is a criminologist as well, and she is an assistant professor of criminology and criminal justice at Ohio Dominican University. Now, Dr. Jones received her PhD in the administration of justice from Texas Southern University, and she is a scholar in race and crime. Her research interests include race and crime policing, and juvenile delinquency. She is particularly interested in issues of racial socialization, mass incarceration, disproportionate minority contact, also known as DMC, and the intersection of race and gender in the criminal justice system. Dr. Jones currently serves as the National Director of Research for the Teen and Police Service Academy, also known as TAPS, which is a federally funded program designed to reduce social distance between police officers and at-risk minority youth. She has written several articles on race, the criminal justice system, and juvenile offending. She is the co-editor of a critical analysis of race and the administration of justice. Dr. Jones has also spoken at several national conferences on issues of race, policing, and disproportionately minority contact. She is a reviewer for the Journal of Juvenile Justice, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquencies official journal. She is also a member of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, the American Society of Criminology, and the Racial Democracy and Criminal Justice Network. So we want to welcome to the Michael Imhotep Show, Dr. Chenelle Jones. How you doing today, sister?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, excellent. Just had Dr. Boyce Watkins on, and a lot to cover. Been dealing with a lot, doing a lot of research. So it's definitely good to finally get you on the show as well. I've read some of your articles in the past, so definitely good to get you on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Now, let me just ask you quickly. Now, usually when we see like criminologists like on TV or something like that, they're usually balding white men with pot bellies. Okay. Now, how many are there? A lot of African American female criminologists, especially those with PhDs?
They're slim pickings, but the ones that are a formidable force to be reckoned with. And, I have to acknowledge them, Dr. Hilla Potter, Dr. Helen T. Green, who is the race and crime scholar of all race and crime scholars, Dr. Allison Cotton, Dr. Ruth Peterson. There are a few,
okay,
but there needs to be more. We need more.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And very quickly now, explain to people what exactly is a criminologist.
So a criminologist is one who studies the collective causes of crime and criminal behavior.
Okay.
Very simple.
Okay, collective causes of crime, criminal behavior, things like this. The criminal justice system also is
exactly, and the criminal justice system and how people are treated within the criminal justice system. So anything pretty much dealing with crime, justice, the administration of justice. And what I do is I teach, my students, most of them want to go off and become police officers and corrections officers and those sorts of things.
Okay, excellent. And I know you are an assistant professor of criminology and criminal justice at Ohio Dominican University as well. Okay.
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. Now, one of the things I wanted to have you on, I know there's an article that you wrote recently dealing with what's really behind the frustration in Ferguson, Missouri. And I also wanted to have you on to try to break down the case, because you are an expert in this type of field, to break down the grand jury case against Officer Darren Wilson, some of the evidence, things like this, because some things the layperson misses, and I think was maybe, there are a number of things different with this grand jury case, but one of the things that's different is that after the no indictment decision was reached and revealed, about 4,700 documents were released pertaining to the case, so people could read this information for themselves. What is your take on this and the physical evidence and the at least 64 witnesses, conflicting testimony, things like this? What's your take on this whole thing?
My take on this whole thing was that it was a unique situation, and you know, grand juries are just typically not conducted in this manner that it was. And so
Absolutely.
Usually, and I personally have never seen a prosecutor work so hard to exonerate somebody ever.
Exactly.
Most prosecutors, if they want to get an indictment, they are able to get an indictment. So, and that's usually through the presentation of the facts of the case. So one of the things that I found was particularly interesting with this case is that they, you know, I understand they're trying to be transparent, but releasing everything is typically not done when a grand jury trial is being, or a grand jury investigation is being conducted. That's just not normal. And so there were several things that took place that just should not have taken place. And then even with some of the instructions that the grand jury was provided with, that's also not normal as well. So there are a lot of issues, a lot of concerns that I have, particularly with this case, how it was conducted, and especially with the outcome. And you know, with the outcome, then you naturally can understand the rage and frustration of the majority of the populace. So those are some of my takes on the situation that has taken place.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure how many of the articles you've read, maybe from like the New York Times or something like this, but they had a very interesting article from November 29th in the New York Times. They posted a lot of the witness testimony for people to read for themselves. And this article entitled "Raised Hands and the Doubts of a Grand Jury," November 29th, 2014, New York Times, on page... which page is this? On page 3 of the article, they said that, quote, others noted that the prosecutors rarely asked skeptical questions of Officer Wilson, Darren Wilson, and frequently let testimony supporting him pass unchallenged, while boring in on the statements of witnesses whose accounts conflicted with the officers. Now, you know, is my perspective, you know, point that I'm making on this is that I think that this should have gone to trial to let all this come out in trial and allow for cross-examination of the witnesses and everything, cross-examination of the evidence, things of this nature. Here, you just had a legal get out of jail free card that was given to him, and it's clear that they did not want to prosecute this case from the beginning. And that I see a lot of biases towards in Officer Darren Wilson's favor with this, you know. So, okay, let's do this. We're coming up on a commercial break. We're going to continue this on the other side of the break, and we want you to get into your article also, okay? All right. Okay. All right, just hold the line. You listen to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. Visit our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network. We're going to post Chenelle's article once again. We posted it before. We're going to post that again for you to check it out as well. Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. Visit our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network. We just posted the article. Posted again. We posted it before a few days ago, but posted again the article written by Dr. Chenelle Jones. It's entitled "Criminologist Chenelle Jones Gives the Real Reason People Were Rioting in Ferguson, Missouri." That's from culturecritic.com. Okay, so now Chenelle, go ahead and right before the break, I was talking about why I think there was a need for the case to actually go to trial in Ferguson as opposed to being handled by a grand jury. Go ahead and respond to that, and then we'll get into your article.
I was going to say, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And, you know, prosecutors are the most powerful agent in the criminal justice system. So, you know, one of the things the prosecutor did, he could have brought charges against Officer Darren Wilson to begin with, and he chose not to, which, you know, in my opinion, signifies that he really didn't want to prosecute him in the first place. Mm-hmm. And even in the presentation of all of the evidence and everything for the grand jury, he actually didn't do it. It was actually his aide. He was rarely even in the courtroom for that.
Right,
so
right.
It just seems
Kathy Aliza Day, yes.
Huh?
Kathy Aliza Day was her name.
Yes.
That was the assistant prosecutor. Yeah, that's who basically handled the case. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, automatically when you start to look at the framework and how everything was set up in the first place, it didn't really seem as though he wanted to prosecute. But in terms of should this have it should have just went to trial to begin with, yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It should have, because that's what you do. That's why we have courts, because we present the evidence in the court, and then we allow the prosecutors and the defendants, we allow questioning and interrogation and all that wonderful stuff. Let the court process, play its part. And then we give that up to a jury who has both of the, evidence from both parties, and then they can render a fair decision. One of the issues that I think you brought it up also was with the evidence, witness testimony. I read all of them, and there were a lot.
Okay.
And there were
64.
several of them.
At least 64, yeah. At least 64 witnesses that I know of, yeah.
That is correct. There were a lot. And some of their stories were similar, and some of their stories were completely opposite. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you have the court process, and the judicial process. So you can have people come in, and you can have the prosecutor go and cross-examine, or you can have the defense attorney go and cross-examine as well. But that did not happen. They essentially prevented that from happening in the first place, and so that's part of the problem. So with the grand jury decision saying there's not enough evidence to indict, we don't even get that opportunity now. And so that's where a lot of the problem is, and that's going into the whole situation why many people are upset. Right. Because Michael Brown essentially did not have his day in court. The officer Darren Wilson played the police. He played the judge, and he played the jury, and then he also played the sentencing commissioner. So this is part of the problem of the situation and why everybody is upset. And, I find it interesting that people are criticizing, some of the protesters and why they are upset, when the reality of the situation is they need to criticize and question the process that led up to the protest. That is what we need to be focusing on. And how did we get to this point where people are so upset, so frustrated, so discontented, so angry with the criminal justice system in general that they feel like they are at the point where in order to even get somebody to even remotely listen and or respond is to engage in a violent protest. When people get to that point, that's where we need to all take a step back and look introspectively at ourselves and figure out, okay, what did we do? What did we contribute? Or how did we get to this point to begin with? That's the problem.
Right. And very quickly, some people, now, one of the things that Prosecutor Robert McCullough said was that a lot of the witness testimony did not corroborate with the physical evidence, whereas Officer Darren Wilson's testimony did corroborate with the physical evidence. Now, some of the accusations because not just the grand jury, but even the handling of evidence, like Officer Darren Wilson bagging his own gun, or
washing his hands
twice, his gun not being dusted for Michael Brown's fingerprints. The whole way it was handled even before it got to the grand jury was crazy. But also you had legal experts saying that Officer Darren Wilson, because he did not fill out an official police report about the murder incident, it allowed him to fit his testimony to the physical evidence. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is I find it interesting that there were somewhere around 64 witness testimonies.
Yes.
Most of the witness testimonies, for the most part, aligned with each other. And then you have the Lone Ranger police officer who comes up with a completely different testimony. That should already raise everyone's eyebrows and just question what exactly happened. And yes, that does allow, when he didn't file the initial report, standard procedure and protocol for police officers is whenever you have a fatality, whenever you discharge your weapon, you go and you file a report. Anything that you do, that's just standard protocol. So for him not to do that, of course that raises the concern that, wait a minute, this was not done correctly. He's trying to cover up something, and maybe the state is corroborating the evidence to align with his story, or making his story align with the evidence. That's exactly what it seems like has happened here. And then, you know, that gets into the situation of the police department needs to be investigated. And I believe the DOJ is doing that right now.
Yes, they are. They have a investigation. There are two investigations the DOJ is doing. One is into civil rights violations of Michael Brown, which has a higher standard, a higher bar than a regular criminal investigation. So people are not as hopeful of that investigation as they are of the investigation into the Ferguson Police Department's procedures, their policing, violations of people, of things like this. So I think they're going to find out a lot in that investigation, personally.
I think they are. I think, you know, this is a systemically just messed up police department, if I can say it just like what it is.
Yes.
Because there are some problems. And, you know, one of the things that just stood out to me was anytime you have a predominantly African-American community and you have only 3 African-American officers serving on the department, there is, I just can't imagine police community relations to be good. There's issues there.
Exactly.
And that's one of the main problems, and that's why I'm always an advocate for police departments to diversify the department so they mirror the communities in which they serve. So, yeah, I agree with you. I believe the floodgates are going to actually open up when the findings from the investigation come out from the DOJ.
I think you alluded to it already, but go ahead and tell us about your article. It's entitled Criminologist Chenelle Jones Gives the Real Reason People Were Rioting in Ferguson. I think you already alluded to it some, but go ahead and tell us about this article.
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit, but one of the things that I noticed is, and this typically happens whenever an African-American, unarmed, we'll even say unarmed, African-American is shot by the police, okay? You get two different sides of the argument. So you get some people who are more passive, and you know, they say, well, okay, the officer was doing his job, this, that, and the other. Then you get the other side of the people who are upset, and they don't riot. Then you get the other people who are really upset, really frustrated, and they do riot. So in this situation, I believe we received a little bit of all of that. And one of the things that really stood out to me is when I kept seeing people criticizing the protesters, criticizing the rioters. And I don't think what a lot of people realize is when you constantly watch MSNBC, CNN, and all these mainstream media sources, they will take a story of just a small few, and they will highlight and broadcast that out to make it seem as though it is much larger and more people involved in what it really is. Not only that, but when people do set stuff on fire and get upset and protest and whatnot, there were a lot of people criticizing the protesters, saying, oh my gosh, I can't even count how many times I heard people saying, oh my gosh, why are they burning down their own neighborhood? They're just making us all look like fools. I mean, it was that sort of sentiment that I kept hearing and reading about. And so, you know, after reading all of that, I said, you know, I thought to myself, I'm like, you know, most people really just don't understand the purpose of civil disorder. And they don't understand why people engage in it. They don't understand how people
What was the name of that
disorder?
What was the name of that disorder?
Civil disorder.
Oh, civil disorder. Okay.
Civil disorder. Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, I think what they were assuming was that it was just them acting out based upon that one event. But in reality, that one event served as the breaking point for a historical lineage of events that have built up into the collective mind. Because most African Americans, any person of color, anybody who really cares about how people are treated unjustly within the criminal justice system. And so,
hold that thought. We got to take a quick break, okay? Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. That was Living by Arrested Development. Living by Arrested Development. Check out their website, arresteddevelopmentmusic.com, arresteddevelopmentmusic.com. Be sure to visit the website of the Empowerment Radio Network, empowermentradionetwork.com, empowermentradionetwork.com. If you like what you hear and you want to support the Empowerment Radio Network, up at the top of the page, click on the green Donate Now button, and you can donate to the Empowerment Radio Network. That helps with expenses. That helps also when we have to travel to different cities, like we're going to be in Las Vegas for a Code Red seminar coming up December 13th and 14th. We'll hear more about that from Dave Anderson either today or tomorrow. So you can go to empowermentradionetwork.com and click on that donate button, and that definitely helps. And you can donate once, but you can also set it up for a monthly donation as well. empowermentradionetwork.com, click on the green Donate Now button. All right, now if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. Chenelle Jones, who is an associate professor of criminology and criminal justice at Ohio Dominican University. We're talking about Ferguson, Missouri. We're talking about the grand jury no indictment of Officer Darren Wilson, some of the testimony and evidence as well. All right, now, Chenelle, go ahead and finish your thought. Right before the break, we were talking about civil disorder, and you were talking about your article also.
Oh, yes. What I was saying was when we look at civil disorder, and the way to understand it is that it just doesn't happen just out of the air. It just doesn't happen based off of one incident. Rather, civil disorder occurs when there have been several incidences that have built up to a point, they have culminated into a civil disorder. And then that's typically, it could be a violent act, which we saw with Ferguson, and it could be, the protests that have happened. But when you get to that point where there is, mass violence, and there were the burning buildings, and I think they torched police cars, and just looting and all of that stuff, we really need to step back and look again introspectively at ourselves and ask ourselves what have we done, or how did we get to this point to begin with? Because it just doesn't happen out of thin air.
Absolutely.
And when we look at, African Americans in particular, and how they have been treated historically throughout the criminal justice system, and how that has built up, even with civil, racial profiling, and how many African Americans can probably identify an experience where they themselves have been racially profiled, or they know somebody, a vicarious experience, they know somebody who has been racially profiled. And then when they see, this young man, Mike Brown, murdered, and no accountability for the officer whatsoever, that strikes a chord with people, and it takes them back to their personal experiences, to their vicarious experiences, to their just unique lived experiences of the African American community as a whole. And they get to a point, where they're just like, okay, if people are not going to listen to us, people are not going to hear us, then this is the only way that we can that we will get attention. And it's so interesting. I gave this example in my class yesterday because we were talking about the civil disorder that took place. And so I asked them about the different protests. And, one student says, oh, they were burning buildings. Another student, oh, they were torching cars. And, they were looting, and they were doing this, that, and the other. And we talked about the young lady who unfortunately got hit with a beanbag.
Yes.
And it took out her eye.
Yes.
They were able to identify all of those situations. But then I asked, well, what happened at the mall? Nobody knew what happened. So I said, what happened? What's going on right now in D.C. on the bridge? Nobody knew what happened. I said, see, when you have the peaceful, more quiet protest, they get attention, but they don't get the mass attention or as much attention as the more violent protests. And you can take this whole philosophy and look at it. I'll give you an example of the March on Selma. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was strategically planned. It was a nonviolent protest. They were marching for their, voting rights. And so they got to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And civil rights activists were, very strategic with how they did this. They said, look, we are going to march peacefully, but we know that once we get to this bridge, we're going to be met by force. They knew the TV cameras and the news stations and everything were going to be there. So they said, we are going to continue to be peaceful, and we're going to let them inflict the violence on us. And once they inflict the violence on us, the news cameras and the TV crews are going to be there so they can take these images and they can disseminate them and broadcast them to the nation. And that is exactly what happened. And eventually, a few months later, you get the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And so there is strategic planning per se, and there's a reason behind the violent protest. And, I do not condone violence at all. I don't think, there's a peaceful way to fix the situation, to rectify the situation. Peaceful means always is what I advocate. And so this is why I'm not criticizing the violent protesters. I just think sometimes we just need to step back before we jump to criticism to understand what has got us to this point to begin with.
And also, I think we have to make a distinction, at least I make a distinction. I think there's a distinction between destruction of property and actual violence. Violence, I think, you see, when the protesters in Selma were attacked by the police were violent towards the protesters. The protesters were not violent towards the police. Okay?
Correct.
And this is what we have to understand when we study, when we're in school and we're taught about the founding fathers, or as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing correctly calls them, the fondling fathers. We're taught about the Boston Tea Party of 1773 and these great patriots led by Patrick Henry, and they dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston tea into the river to protest the tax that was put on by the British. Okay. I should say British tea, and the tax that was put on by the British. They were not called violent for destruction of the property. They weren't called violent. We're taught that they were heroes. But
they were heroes. That's the way that, in the context, yes, they did call them heroes.
Yeah, but we weren't taught that they were violent because they destroyed property, though. But when you have people speaking out, and they were speaking out about mistreatment, even though they were enslaving African people at the same time. When the Constitution was signed, George Washington owned 216 slaves. Thomas Jefferson owned 150 slaves. Mm-hmm. So even though they were denying human beings of their right to pursue liberty and happiness and things like this, we was taught that they're heroes. But when you have people, and I'm not saying people should burn property, destroy property, things like that. I'm saying that it is a symptom of a much larger problem, and people resort to that when they feel that they're not being heard. They're doing that out of frustration. Okay, but they're called thugs. Okay, and they're speaking out about the mistreatment. But when you have the fondling fathers or the founding fathers speaking out about the mistreatment, they're called heroes.
Yeah, and that goes to, again, further stigmatizing African Americans. And, people, this is one of the things, I'm like, they're speaking out against injustice. I really don't even like to call it riots and protests because they're advocating for their humanity and humane treatment. Exactly. I mean, if you think about it. Exactly. So, I have a problem with, you can call them protests and riots to begin with. But that is part of the situation, part of the problem here, and is that, we have different standards for people of color and white Americans. And clearly we see that in how they're portrayed in the media, how certain things happen. I mean, even as recently as the situation involving Elizabeth Lawton and the comments that she made about the Obama girls, President Obama's daughters. Here's the thing. She looks at them. I mean, they didn't even do it. They were just standing. I probably would have looked like that too if my parents were pardoning the turkey. So they're just standing there, minding their own business. And she goes on this rant on Facebook. Right. And quite ironically telling them that they're dressed like they should belong at the bar, that they don't have class, this, that, and the other. And, I found it so interesting that when she was a teenager, she was arrested herself. Exactly. And so I just feel like, sometimes the collective minds of white America have different rules of engagement for different people.
Right. Hold that quick thought. We're going to finish up on the other side of the break. Welcome back to the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network, where knowledge is power. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a lot of information there, video clips for you, things like this. Also, in addition to my DVD presentations being there, you can get all 3 installments of Hidden Colors 3 for one low price. You get them all for $60. Plus, you'll get 3 bonus DVDs from me as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It's for a very limited time only. Okay, we're speaking with Dr. Chenelle Jones, who is a assistant professor of criminology at Ohio Dominican University. Okay, Chenelle, right before the break, we were talking about the article that you wrote dealing with Ferguson, Missouri, and where the frustration comes from that we see that manifests with the destruction of property, things of this nature. And I wanted to find out from you. Now, some people say, and a lot of people in law enforcement, they'll point out two things. They'll say, number one, the main thing that matters is the mindset of the officer Darrell Wilson in this case, and what he thought in his mind. Did he think his life was in danger? Did he think Michael Brown was charging at him? Things like this. That's what matters. And then also, you'll have them also point out the 23-foot trail of blood leading back to where Officer Wilson was standing, which corroborates some testimony that Michael Brown was charging towards Darren Wilson, but they haven't defined what charging is from what I see. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I can. Actually, I'm in a unique position because through the Teen and Police Service Academy, one of the things that we do is pair teenagers with police officers, and I believe we're in 9 cities right now. And so I work with a lot of police officers. And so the argument that they are making, with this is that at the end of the day, officers are trained to make sure they do whatever they can to go home to their family. That's their number one, their first and foremost priority is to make sure that they are safe. And so with that being said, I can see where a lot of officers would say, well, if he feared for his life, if he was afraid for his safety, if he thought he was in some form of danger, then he needed to use lethal force in order to control the threat, is really what they would say. But that's where you get into some issues that are tricky because most officers have a use of force continuum that they need to follow, and they use of force continues. Use of force continuum, and it spans from just the basic officer presence, verbal commands, soft hand controls, hard hand controls, and then lethal force. It's a continuum. And so typically, based upon the situation, officers attempt to de-escalate the situation by going up each step of the use of force. The problem that I have here is it seems now, I was not there, so I don't know, but it seems as though Officer Darren Wilson went from, one end of the use of force continuum completely to lethal force. And I think one of the statements that he gave was his taser was uncomfortable, so he didn't carry it. And you see, as a result of that, we have a dead African-American man. Mm-hmm. And so that is part of the problem here. The other problem that I have, and I understand where the police officers are coming from. The other side of that, however, would be this whole issue of implicit bias. And when we talk about implicit bias, those are the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner, in an unconscious manner. And these are opinions that we have or perceptions that we have, certain dispositions that we have towards other people. It could be race-based, it could be gender-based, it could be age, and these operate on an unconscious level. Most of us are primed, from birth, and we all have these biases.
Right.
The issue becomes a problem, or it becomes an issue when we start to act out on these biases and we don't even acknowledge that we have them. Cool. Well, another thing that I do is give my students an implicit bias test. And, this first thing in my race and crime class, first thing we do. And I always tell them, prepare, you're not going to be happy with your results. And every year, it's somewhere around between 90 and 99% of the class, when they get the results back, it says they favor whites over African Americans. And when you think about, the areas that they grow up in, the stereotypes that are constantly ingrained in their head, the way that they perceive certain groups, not having relationship with people outside of their inner circle who reflect different cultural backgrounds and demographics, then they let those stereotypes then begin to manifest, and people act out on them. And so we have, I believe it was Catherine Russell Brown who coined the term criminal black man, all one word, when she says, sometimes in the collective minds of people, they have this perception that all black men are it's just not a black man, he's just not a man, but no, he's a criminal black man. This is his identity, and that follows.
What was the name of that person?
I just wonder.
What was the name of that person that you mentioned? You mentioned somebody's name, Brown? What was it?
Catherine Russell Brown.
Catherine Russell Brown. Okay, mm-hmm. Go ahead.
But what I was saying is, my issue with Officer Darren Wilson is, I wonder how he has been primed with these implicit biases that he has. How has society shaped his perception of people of color? And then, he begins to act out on it. And then that's what led him to just automatically assuming that this Michael Brown was 18, so there's a kid, that this kid is something that should be feared. We got to this point where even with a little 12-year-old, Tamir Rice up in Cleveland, right, where, it's just the devaluing of black male life. And that is the problem. And not even recognizing that these are kids, automatically assuming that they're a threat, automatically assuming that they're up to no good, automatically assuming that their life is disposable. And that's where we get into the problems. And that's where I think, and people say the police need to wear body cameras, but this is a humanity issue.
Yes.
And I don't think we should base it, contingent upon, police officers acting right just because they have a body camera on them. No, they should be acting right because it's the right thing to do. And so these are some of the issues, that we face. And definitely in order to improve it, we need better police-community relations. I would say the Teen and Police Service Academy is unique because it does bridge that social distance between police officers and kids. And, when we have these discussions sometimes, some of these kids say, well, why did you pull me over? And then officers explain, well, we received a description of this, and this is what happened. This is how officers have to operate. And right. So sometimes it takes that dialogue, but, it also takes more progress like that, police community relations, demilitarizing the police. I understand the president, he had his press conference meetings yesterday.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things that he's attempting to do is demilitarize the police, arm them all with body cameras. And we will see how this goes, but I just hope at the end of the day that was not one of those feel-good meetings, but there are actual action items and outcomes that come out as a result of that. And so only time will tell. But there really needs to be more work on behalf of both law enforcement, but also on the community as well. One of the problems with Ferguson, they only had 3 African-American officers. Mm-hmm. We really need to diversify our police departments, and that's where I would encourage, more African-Americans, more black people and people of color to go get on the police department. We have these stereotypes and we perceive, we have these trust issues with the police department. Well, my thing is get in the system and change the system. And so that way, we have people working outside as well as on the inside. And hopefully this could bridge, these distances, these differences between these two populations, and hope everyone eventually gets to some point where we start to understand and respect and really appreciate the diversity and the differences that we all bring to the table. So that's my take on this whole situation.
Absolutely. Okay, let people know how they can read your articles, how they can get in contact with you.
Well, they can get in contact with me through Facebook, Miss Jones 1908. They can email me, jonesb12@ohiodominican.edu. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook. You can get my book, A Critical Analysis of Race in the Administration of Justice, by just a Google search. My article,
give us the name of that book again. Give us the name of that book again.
A Critical Analysis of Race and the Administration of Justice.
Okay.
And my articles, you can access them off of Culture Critic or Your Black World, and also the HamptonInstitute.org.
Okay, excellent. Well, look, we're going to have you back again very, very soon. There's a lot to analyze, break down, critique, evaluate, etc. So we're going to have you back on very soon, okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks. Thanks for coming on, okay? You have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. That's Dr. Chenelle Jones, who is an assistant professor of criminology and criminal justice at Ohio Dominican University. Very few African-American female criminologists, so we're definitely going to have her back on. Hopefully that helped to contextualize what's been taking place. And, we've been dealing with that and try to deal with the facts and evidence as best we can here on the Michael Imhotep Show. Visit our website. We're about to get out of here. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a lot of information there to empower you. All 18 of my DVD presentations are there, and you can get them for one low price.